We're talking about respectable sins. Those sins that those of us who are active in our faith may almost be unaware of, but folks beyond us are quite aware of. So this morning we're going to talk about one that I think James highlights, and that is claiming to have faith, but doing nothing about it. Has your faith made a change in your life? Has your faith made a difference in who you are? Does your faith impact your actions? To put it plainly, do you ever do something in deed that matches your words? I find myself once in a while getting so word heavy, I have no actions to back it up. Maybe you found yourself there too. That's certainly where James found his congregation as he talks about it in chapter 2, verses 14 through 19. Look at it with me. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm, and be well fed," but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, "You have faith and I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds and I'll show you my faith by my deeds." You believe there is one God? Good. Even the demons believe that and they shudder. Go back one verse with me. Show me your faith without deeds and I'll show you my faith by my deeds. We're going to talk this morning about how do you and I show our faith, if we do, by what we do in the name of God. So, 3 simple ideas. I got to tell you, this is really not a big problem with most of the folks I know. But I never point to myself as an example of faithful living. I never set myself up. Oh, look at me. I haven't seen that in a long, long time. I saw it one time. I had a person who came to me one time and in very great piety looked at me and said, "I am the most mature Christian I have ever met." This person was also the meanest gossip I'd ever met, and the most judgmental person I'd ever met. And I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. What I wanted to say was, you need to know more people. But I'm the most mature. I've never seen that in any of us. This is not really something we have a big issue with, but there's a side note to it that sometimes we do have an issue with, and that's when we put individuals on a pedestal. Maybe it's a renowned teacher, or maybe a writer, or maybe a musician. I don't know. And we kind of elevate them. And the reality is that there is no human being who can't be knocked off a pedestal. This week we've read the scandal out of Pennsylvania of children's lives ruined forever when people were put on pedestals and assumed to be unassailable. You've seen it. You've watched. Don't ever, no matter how winsome, don't ever put somebody on a pedestal, because you're setting them up for a fall. Second thing I want you to see. James is trying to get hypocrisy out of the congregation. People were walking around saying, hey, look how faithful I am, like that person I told you, the most mature person, most mature Christian I've ever known. James must have known a boatload of those folks. We avoid the curse of hypocrisy when we spend our time actually doing something for God's sake. Now, back in Jesus' day, the scribes and the rulers and the elders made it hard for people who were not from Jerusalem to keep all the laws. In fact, they set it up so that if you lived near Jerusalem, if you were a professional religious person, it was a lot easier. Do we ever talk about folks who are from the backwoods? Maybe we ever use any derogatory terms, or maybe not us, but other folks use the term hillbilly. You ever heard that term, hillbilly? Redneck. You ever heard that? The people of Jerusalem had a better term. They called it the Am Haaretz. The Am Haaretz, the people of the land, or rednecks. And what they said was, they made it so that the laws, if you touched a sheep, if you were a shepherd, you're unclean. If you deal with animals, you're unclean. And so the sophisticates of Jerusalem made it more challenging for the Am Haaretz to be people of faith. But all the while they're saying, look at us in our finery. We're better than you are. And James says, listen, here's what we do. When we're actually doing something for God's sake, we're destroying hypocrisy. You see, those folks who were the rulers and elders spent all their days, it started out as a good thing, but spent all their days trying to find something in Leviticus to prove they were smarter than somebody else. You know, faith is not a game of Bible trivia. Faith is not a game of who knows most about Leviticus. As James says, it's a matter of who's doing something to put their knowledge into action. Jesus is called teacher more than anything else in the Gospels. He's called teacher, but that's not all he did. In fact, he did things that you and I could never do. Would you like to be able to heal? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to heal? I would really like to be able to walk over to the ICU unit right now and walk in every room and say, get up and go home. Wouldn't you? I think that'd be fantastic. I can't do that. Can you? I have never fed 5,000 people on 2 meals from Long John Silver's. Have you? Huh? Have you ever done that? Have you ever walked up to a tomb and said, come out, and the person walked out? I've not been able to do that. I've never even tried it. I'd like to, but I have none of those powers. But what I do have the power to do is to do something for God's sake. And if I do that, I am diminishing the charge of hypocrisy being an authentic charge against me. But the third thing is the most important thing I want you to see this morning, and that's this. Ultimately, we as people of faith, people who study the Word of God, people who believe the Bible to be the Word of God, ultimately, we point others to Jesus, not to any other believer. We point them to Jesus. Our works are designed not to get us brownie points, but designed to help other people know the grace of God. And I want to tell you a story about a guy who did just that. I met him 37 years ago. He was small of stature and quiet of voice. He grew up in the shadow of our East Tennessee mountains. He started work after he graduated from high school as a mechanic. He worked on Model A and T-model Fords. And he learned how to keep a car going. And when he was about 30, he was at church one day and he felt God was saying he wanted him to do something different. And so he went over about 45 miles to Carson Newman. And he said, I'd like you to teach me to be a minister. And they did. But they said, this isn't all there is. And they sent him about 300 miles away, all the way up to Louisville, Kentucky. And he walked in and he said, I'd like you to teach me how to be a minister. And they did. And then he went all the way back down into West Tennessee. I'm not sure grammatically how to say this. He went to Bells, Tennessee. Now, do you know where Bells is or where Bells are? I'm not sure which one it is. He went all the way down to Bells, Tennessee. Anybody ever been to Bells? One person, 2 people, 3 people. I see, well, more than that. Wow, this congregation is a lot more sophisticated than first service. They only had one. He went to Bells, Tennessee, and he served his whole career at one congregation. And he came back to the mountains. And he came up to me one Sunday at church and said, would you like to have somebody to talk to? I said, yeah. Come down Wednesday at 2 o'clock. So I went down to his little 4-room cabin. And he said, do you mind if I smoke my pipe? I said, fine by me. He was about 78 at the time. He said, I brought you down here for 2 reasons. I like to have somebody to talk to about books. You like to talk about books? I said, I love to talk about books. I like to talk about books. And he said, the other reason, we talked about books for a while. The other reason, he said, is this. I want you to help me help people. I want you to hear that line. I want you to help me help people. And I said, what do you have in mind? He said, I'd like you to find me some people who need their cars tuned up and who can't afford it. And I'd like you to find me some people who need an oil change and can't afford it. And I'd like you to send them to me because that's one way I can live out the gospel. And he said, why don't we start with your car? I was making the princely sum of $9,000 a year. I was tickled to have a free oil change. He said to me, though, that day, once you buy one of those cars with computers, our deal's over. Because I'm not learning anything about computers. And over the years that Jim lived, into his 90s, I don't know how many single mothers and widows who would drive down to his little street and he had opened the hood and he would show them Jesus. You know what I mean? I know you, and you're just like him. You may want to help people, but maybe you just don't know where. You heard Marjorie this morning. It's a great thing to walk in there on Tuesday afternoon and see people helping kids. I get to talk to the kids 2 or 3 times a year and to watch those children. Maybe some of them, for the first time, know somebody outside their family who cares about them. And I get to go down to Providence and I get to watch you. I get to watch you do records. I get to watch you pray with people. And I get to see you helping people know Jesus. And I get to go down to recovery at Clay Street. And I get to see you at work. And you see, I think if James came to see us, I think if James gave us a grade, James didn't give anybody an A. Did you ever have a teacher just didn't give anybody an A? James wouldn't give anybody an A. That's against his nature. But I think James would say, you know, you're doing pretty good. But maybe this morning you want to live out the grace and truth of Jesus. And you just need a place to do it. Like Jim, who knew how to change oil and tune up a car. You may know some way that you can help somebody that we've never dreamed of. So in a minute, we're going to sing. It's a hymn you're going to know, Trust and Obey. And as we sing, our invitation is always to be a follower of Jesus. If that's your hope and desire, we'd love to talk with you about it here at the front. But where you are this morning, I'd like you to think about it. Maybe you've been wanting to help somebody. And maybe you're just looking for a place to do it. Just talk to God about it.